Hello, fellow Quillers, and welcome to this special episode of the program dedicated to the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. Now, I know that a great majority of the members of the Quiller Nation are not members of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. That's okay. The numbers are pretty clear. The SOF has approximately 500 or so members, and the Quiller Nation is now approximately 1,500 listeners strong every month. So I decided to drop this special episode between regular episodes of the series so that those of you who are interested in the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship and its politics can be informed. And those of you who are not interested in the SOF and its politics can hit the stop button now and wait until next week, when my first of several episodes to come featuring our great friend Hank Whittemore will be released for your listening pleasure, the first of which will be exploring the Phoenix and the Turtle. So watch for that a week from the date of this broadcast. For those of you who do have an interest in the SOF and what is happening with that organization, I promise not to take up too much of your time, but I felt it was necessary to deliver to you a brief statement about the state of things as they stand, where in fact I stand on several important developments, and some pertinent news I now have to share regarding the coming Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship election. I'd like to start with thanking so many of you for the emails I have received, including and most especially those of you who have sent words of criticism and suggested points of reflection for me. I have greatly cherished your choosing to reach out to me as opposed to just ignoring me or railing against me or shouting my name in disdain, but who have actually taken the opportunity and the position of reaching out to me over the past couple of months to share your thoughts, ideas, suggestions, criticisms, etc. For that reason, I'd like to address some of the points that some of you have raised. I am, as some of you have described, undeniably a bull in a china shop. I admit that. I am brash and bold, sometimes hyper-passionate and overly outspoken, irreverent and hasty, impatient and ambitious. Indeed, I am sometimes even dangerously vainglorious. I thank all of those of you who have taken the effort and shown the interest to point these things out to me. It does, in fact, help keep me in check and serve to temper my actions, though often my actions do not demonstrate that truth. Thank you, and thank you again. You are a source of inspiration for me and for this very episode and what I have to share today. I am all of those things you say, and sometimes to a grievous fault. I'd also like to thank the many of you who have taken the time to send words of encouragement and validation of my belief that there is much work to be done for our Lord of Oxford, and that work must be done with new energy, youthful vigor, and the same brash and bold, impatient and irreverent, hasty passion that I believe is required to once and for all finally share this mystery with the world. I apologize, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say that again. I apologize to every Oxfordian for any and all of my moments of insensitivity, sharp impatience, and rash judgment. If and ever I have named anyone by name in criticism for their actions, I hope indeed that it was only those such as Ben Shapiro. Oh, no, wait, sorry. I meant James Shapiro. James Shapiro. He might as well be Ben Shapiro. And those like him, such as the leaders of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, who continue to profit from the mythology they foist upon us, are indeed worthy of our outward criticism. However, if I have ever publicly criticized a fellow Oxfordian by name, I hope it has always been one who chose to open that door, such as I have, to the world of name recognition within our movement, and therefore willingly subjected themselves to direct criticism, such as I do every other week. Prestige is indeed a double-edged sword. Still, if I have offended anyone, I am truly sorry. That said, please know, I am angry about where we have been, where we are, and where we should and could be. I truly believe that there are those who are deathly afraid of where we can be and where we need to be because change frightens people. Technology frightens some people. The world of social media terrifies some people to the point of frozen inaction, and they just won't budge even a little to embrace the modern world of modern communications. When my dad was alive, he never even had an email address, let alone a social media account. He didn't use computers. He could barely use his smartphone. And he wasn't about to change for any reason. And I knew better than to push him to do so. Some of you have chided me for my outward criticism of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship and the resistance of its leaders to effect any real change. Some of you have outwardly asked me, why would you submit to be president of an organization that you seem to hate so much? I don't hate the SOF or any of its members. Hate is a very strong word. I do dislike what the SOF has become, or more importantly, rather, what it has not become. But I once believed it had the potential to become so much more than it is. I dislike the tremendous age gap between those in power and those newer members who wish to see change before they too are grown old. I dislike the apparent fear that some of the leaders have to open discussion about major topics, issues, and differing viewpoints. I dislike the passive-aggressive way in which those differing viewpoints have been handled and the way certain people are treated within the organization because they have the audacity to disagree or openly express their differing views. I dislike the pomposity of certain members who believe their multiple decades within the organization entitles them to power within the organization or some sort of high priest authority over certain topics about this issue, this great mystery. And I say these things. And as I say these things, I am reminded that some of you have shared with me that you feel you have been wrongfully grouped in with the issues I have raised about the organization. To that, I can only say, the conscience of the king. We all know whether or not we are guilty of certain behaviors. I began this episode with a confession of my own frailties and rash behavior. I only ask that the leadership of the organization conduct their own self-reflection to examine their own actions and their treatment of others, most especially those who are new to the organization and have an energetic zeal to contribute their views, opinions, and perhaps their volunteer hours to help truly move the needle for our Lord of Oxford. Perhaps most importantly, we must once and for all properly address the rifts that continue to split Oxfordians in half. And our failure to create a coherent narrative about the reasons behind the creation of the Shakespeare pseudonym, and our failure to embrace new generations of those who are seeking answers to their own questions. We know from Jim Warren's recently published extensive history of the Oxfordian movement that those in power have historically shut down or shut out those who have dared to believe in a narrative that has been viewed as controversial or threatening to the high priest power elites throughout the last century. In the highest irony, those elites have often resorted to attempted censorship of the views of others. And though I believe that a cohesive narrative is necessary to future advances in the realm of public opinion, I also believe in an open forum for discussion of all areas of discovery, including other authorship candidates. I believe there is much to glean from those who pursue their studies of North, Rutledge, Stanley, Bassanio, Bacon, Marlowe, and others. Their work only further demonstrates the very real reasons to discard the Stratfordian myth, and regardless of our differences, we can all agree on the most important thing, which is that the Stratford man is not the author. Don't Quill the Messenger and the Quiller Nation has always been about providing a forum for all directions of inquiry into the authorship mystery. And I call it that because I believe that's what it should be aptly named. It's not an authorship question. We know the answer to the question. Stratford didn't write it. The mystery is who did. Sure, I openly express my views and what my journey has led me to believe, but I have always graciously welcomed my guests and guests of all faiths and all beliefs about this issue and treated them all with the due respect that should be afforded any guest. My mother taught me how to be a gracious host. As long as the Quiller Nation exists and continues to grow, I will continue to provide this platform to any and all who have something interesting to share on the topic of the authorship mystery. No censorship here. Only outspoken advocacy available to all that may at times result in vigorous debate. But let us do as Shakespeare instructs us in The Taming of the Shrew. Behave as adversaries in law. Strive mightily, but eat and drink as friends. However, there can be no allowance for censorship. And that leads me to a major dilemma. A dilemma that was recently pointed out to me by none other than Dr. Earl Showerman himself. Earl sent me an email a while back, drawing my attention to what I now call the SOF censorship clause. And unfortunately, it illustrates my point all too perfectly. Article 5, Section 2, subsection D of the SOF bylaws reads, quote, "Trustees shall not publicly criticize decisions made by the board with which they disagree." End quote. I will repeat that. Quote, "Trustees shall not publicly criticize decisions made by the board with which they disagree." That's a major problem for me. I, quite frankly, don't see how in a democratic organization any board member, who should be a representative of the general membership, can hope to represent the general members without publicly seeking input about decisions with which they may disagree. That is indeed the catalyst of change. In order to effect change, one must first garner support of the majority through explaining a different point of view, which cannot be done without questioning the status quo. By silencing dissenting voices on the board, the majority of the board ensures their decisions will go unquestioned and therefore unchallenged and therefore unchanged. Imagine for a moment if our members of Congress were precluded from publicly criticizing majority decisions of their colleagues with which they disagree. What kind of government would that be? What kind of government can that be? Now imagine a board member who raises discussion in a board meeting, say, about eliminating this censorship clause from the bylaws, but that board member is outvoted by a majority who fears criticism and debate and thus instituted that clause in the first place. This dissenting board member would then be precluded from publicly stating that he tried to eliminate said censorship clause but failed to do so. Said board member would also be in danger if they were to speak out about the issue and publicly criticize the vote against changing the bylaws. The rest of the board would have immediate grounds to remove the offender from the board. Am I the only one who sees an issue with this? Am I the only one who believes this has been a major source of the organization's failure to change, adapt, and grow over the years? I don't believe I am. Throughout the modern history of the organization, a small group of hand-selected people have created a slate of what I like to call yes candidates to serve on a yes board that goes along to get along. That slate has been summarily approved by a membership that has been presented no alternative options, and then the board has gone on to rule basically autonomously without any fear of any opposition by any of its board members, and therefore no member feels safe to approach a board member to become an advocate for change because the board member would be acting against the bylaws if they did so. This is not democracy. Were I to be elected president of the organization, I would undoubtedly be quickly silenced on any topic the majority of the board members did not wish to address, and on any issue resulting in a vote of the board with which I might disagree. This leads me to what I have discovered is now the 800-pound gorilla in the room that I have recently learned of regarding decisions about the 2023 Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship Conference. It is no secret to those in the know that Earl Showerman has been working very hard for several years now to propose and obtain approval for holding a conference in New Orleans. Earl is a great lover of jazz and extremely fond of the Bourbon Street jazz scene. He envisions Oxfordians enjoying the nightlife of New Orleans after their long days of conference presentations, getting out, dancing to the jazz, perhaps having a mint julep, and enjoying the nightlife of New Orleans. His ideas about conference locations have often included sweeteners, I'll call them, that he has hoped will entice people to come to those conferences. In 2019, the Mark Twain House was indeed a successful sweetener for drawing people to Hartford, Connecticut. I believe that was Don Rubin's very successful idea. It had everything a successful conference could need. It was close to the SOF's largest bastion of members, the New England region. It contained a literary-based attraction, that sweetener, with a direct connection to the authorship question, Mark Twain. And it resulted in a major win. And what I believe is true, the most successfully attended conference in SOF history. It's unfortunate that a pandemic struck and that interfered with the momentum that might have been achieved post Hartford. But I don't know. I'll express some ideas about what's happening in Ashland in a moment. But I can tell you that while serving as the PR and marketing director for the SOF at the time, it was very easy for me to get behind the Hartford conference location and do all in my power to help promote it far and wide. That promotion was infectious amongst the members and amongst the leadership and even some media attention that we were able to garner, most especially right there in Hartford, in the daily newspaper, 2 different stories in the Hartford Daily Current. It was a great choice, and the efforts we made to promote the conference were highly successful. Unfortunately, I have learned recently from reliable sources that the current board has already voted to approve New Orleans as the 2023 SOF conference location. And indeed, there is a line item on the posted and published agenda for the annual meeting scheduled for Sunday, September 25th, to announce the conference details at the end of that meeting. Earl's persistence over the years has resulted in a win for him. Congratulations, Earl. New Orleans it is. But I cannot support this decision. Not only do I disagree with the decision, but I believe New Orleans to be one of the worst possible locations to hold an SOF conference. We have no membership base there, and thus no boots on the ground to advance the conference by paying personal visits to local schools, institutions, business groups, libraries, and local media outlets the way we did in Hartford. I believe the Bourbon Street jazz scene to be a distraction rather than a sweetener that would draw members to the conference. And unfortunately, New Orleans is currently topping the charts as one of America's leading centers of violent crime, with growing and alarming rates. A simple Google search will indicate that truth. One could argue that perhaps that latter fact might lower the cost to stay in what is usually a very expensive place to visit due to its otherwise popular tourist draw. But I believe that growing crime reputation will be something that older membership base of the organization will consider before deciding whether or not to attend. Not to mention, SOF conferences tend to be held during what is usually the height of hurricane season along the Gulf Coast. Some people already, and rightfully so, remain fearful of travel or gathering large groups or visiting a large touristy area where a lot of people travel to. Rising inflation has many of us prioritizing our expenditures in new and different ways than we have before. And I think this is playing out in what has happened with the attendance numbers for the upcoming Ashland Conference. Conference Committee Chair Don Rubin admitted to me in a recent email that the SOF will be lucky, his words, if it breaks even on the coming Ashland Conference. Nearly half of the presentations will be delivered remotely via Zoom or video recording because even the regular number of proposed presenters has fallen to a minimal number. The decision to offer the conference by live stream, not a bad one, but necessarily not a good one, because it was undoubtedly an effort to raise additional funds to help offset what is looking to be a financial failure of a conference. I hope that works. But now that the board has opened the door to remote attendance by presenters and members alike, it will be very difficult to close that door and draw people into airports for travel to the next conference, especially in New Orleans. In weighing out the cumulative effect of the various issues that I have now shared with you today, and I'll review them briefly like this. Those who have rightly shared concerns about my headstrong nature and impatience for change. The number of elites within the organization who have been offended by my positions and statements and have thus demonstrated an unwillingness to work with me. The existence of a censorship clause that would effectively silence my voice on any matter before the board with which I disagree. The board's over-hasty decision to approve a conference location before the coming election, and a new president has an ability to weigh in on that decision. And my inability to support and promote a conference in that location of New Orleans leads me to this determination. I must agree with my critics that I am the wrong person for the role of president of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. In fact, I am realizing more and more that I am the absolute opposite of the type of leader the organization has been designed to seek and has historically placed in that type of role. When I first looked at the data, the number of listeners who regularly stream episodes of Don't Quill the Messenger every month, and then compared that to the number of members the SOF had that remained pretty stagnant over the last decade, and then a sudden gain in members of roughly approximately 20% increase over the previous 2 years. I don't know this year's numbers, but the previous 2 years was 7% the first year, 13% the next year, which I firmly believe was a direct result of members of the Quiller Nation joining the SOF. And therefore, I thought it best and sought to merge the members of the Quiller Nation with the members of the SOF and bring these two Oxfordian, or at the very least, Shakespeare authorship mystery communities together. I felt I could best accomplish that goal by running for president of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. I see now that I was wrong. I see now more clearly than ever that that was a bad idea, as well as a very short-sighted idea. It would be like attempting to merge the members of the De Vere Society in the United Kingdom with the members of the SOF. A bad idea. Just as bad as attempting to merge the Quiller Nation with the membership of the SOF. Each of these three are separate entities with some common causes, but completely different missions, different goals, and most importantly, different demographics. Widely different demographics. Just like with the SOF and the DVS, there will always be some crossover of members here and there between these three entities. And I believe there will always be plenty of people who will choose to be members of all three: the SOF, the DVS, and the Quiller Nation. I am. And I know some of you listening are too. Some of you, many of whom I think of as mentors and advisors, have pointed out to me that I already have an important role in serving to bring to light the various aspects of the authorship mystery. I am humbled, deeply humbled, by those of you who have suggested that my role as host of this series is a better place for my time and talents than to serve any organization in any capacity. Indeed, the current president of the SOF Board of Trustees must agree with you, as I was dropped from the email exchanges of any and all of the committees of the organization upon which I once served, not long after I announced my candidacy. Well, Article 7, Section 6, subsection A of the bylaw reads, quote, "The president shall appoint all members of all committees, provided such members are also members in good standing of the fellowship." It is the absolute and totalitarian prerogative of the president of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship to do exactly as the president wishes with regards to committee appointments. I understand. And having approved a slate of candidates put forward by their own nomination committee, the president and members of the board have no choice but to publicly support that vote, and indeed are precluded by the bylaws from voicing any public criticism of that decision or that approved slate of candidates. It's an interesting conundrum. It's an interesting conundrum for me as well, and one I realize cannot be defeated by one brash and bold, sometimes hyper-passionate and overly outspoken, irreverent and hasty, impatient and ambitious, vainglorious bull in a china shop. I concede this to be true. Nobody wants to see the next year of the SOF overshadowed with conflict and political infighting. Nobody wants to see Don't Quill the Messenger potentially derailed from its current course of exponential growth due to its host getting bogged down and wearied by a resistant core of high priests of the order who do not want to affect his proposed changes in any way. As one advisor from within the organization, whom I have a great deal of respect for, said to me not long ago, about this issue. A Pyrrhic victory is not a victory worth fighting for. He's right. He's absolutely right. And so many of you have also been right. My role is here. I serve the Quiller Nation, a growing global community open to all and choosing to embrace all comers. We have much work to do, and it is not our place to force change upon the 500 or so members of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. Allow them their place. Allow Earl Showerman to have his year of victory as the president of the organization, promoting the conference that he has worked so long and hard to achieve. I cede that victory to him. I concede my loss. I withdraw myself from the race of president of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, and I wish the incoming president, Dr. Earl Showerman, its board of trustees, and the general membership of the organization the best of wishes and the best of luck. Now, I know some of you right now are upset. Some of you are angry. You might even be shouting at your speakers. I know that those of you listening are discouraged by this announcement. I will remind you that I am always available by email. You can email contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com, contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. I invite your reactions and responses. And as you've heard me say many times on my program, I eventually get to every email. I do respond to every email. It sometimes takes me a while, but I get there. Now, I know some of you have already cast your ballots. I have as well. And yes, I voted for myself. And I hope the organization will be intellectually honest with itself by moving forward with an actual count of the ballots in order to recognize what number, whatever number that may be, of the number of members who agree with the issues that I have raised during my candidacy and through my platform. To me, as I stated in my candidate statement, it was a victory to obtain ballot status and to acquire a platform for raising issues that I believe would have otherwise been ignored without my exercising my rights as a member through the bylaws that would require me as a qualifying candidate open access to provide my platform. Perhaps President Earl and his board of trustees will actually embrace some of the items and plans I outlined there. Perhaps not. That cannot be the mission of the Quiller Nation. We have our own goals to accomplish, and I believe together we will accomplish them. We will continue to spread the word in our way. We will continue to wear our Quiller swag with pride. We will continue to spark conversations with coworkers, actors in our companies, or even the person we're sitting next to on an airplane, which I very recently did, and I think I may have made a convert. At the very least, I inspired another individual to ask some questions. Now, some of you may raise an issue with the cost this election has forced the organization to encumber. That cost is not lost. Had I won the election, the cost would have been exponential in a contentious struggle for an entire year. Had I lost, well, that was probably destined anyway. And then just consider this concession speech a little bit early so that there will not be any contention at the coming conference in Ashland. Had I not run at all, I would never have been given the platform to share my positions the way that I was able to with the full membership through the quarterly newsletter and 850 words. And now, after having been caught way off guard by the details of their own bylaws and not having any proper election procedure in place to account for any challenge to the approved slate of candidates. Now, the organization actually has an approved process in place for those who may wish to also step up and challenge the establishment someday, obtain their signatures, and run for office. Let's hope that it isn't some secret Stratfordian who, with as little as, in my calculation, around $15,000, could purchase up a series of gift memberships for as few as 300 of his fellow Stratfordians, run for office on a petition, usurp the entire organization, and do away with our mission statement altogether. Do we have a plan for that, just in case? I don't know. Is it necessary? I don't know. But if you're going to have bylaws, you should have procedures and policies to back them up. That's just my opinion. Perhaps such a warning will now lead to some true bylaws reform to come. We shall see. But back to the cost. In addressing the cost of the printing and the bulk mailing of ballots to all members, some in other countries, I am prepared to make a donation to the organization to help offset that cost on only one condition. I know. Oh, well, what do you mean? You can't give a condition. Yes, I can. And it's this. If I make that donation, I only ask that the money be specifically earmarked for the forwarding of the recommendations and goals outlined by the Education Outreach Committee, which has been stagnant for far too long, and I believe due to a lack of support at the board level and proper financing. I will be reaching out to members of that committee very soon to determine an amount they need to move forward with their plans. Who knows? Maybe I'll even give them more than the cost of the printing and mailing of the 500 ballots. Perhaps it will be enough to cover the cost of printing and mailing materials to 1,000 middle and high school teachers across America to encourage them to teach the authorship mystery to their students and provide them access to the materials to do so. That's a dream of mine. And I can help advance that dream from right here, under these headphones and in front of this microphone, without being president of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I have already taken up far much more of your time than I intended to with this special episode. So I will leave you with this final note. Some of you have chided me for seeking this nonprofit organization to behave more like a for-profit organization. My answer is this, and I hope President Earl is listening. Article 7, Section 6, subsection A of the bylaws reads, quote, "The president shall have the general powers and duties of supervision and management usually vested in the office of president of a corporation." I hope the entire board will take that line to heart. And anytime Earl wishes to be a guest here on Don't Quill the Messenger, he will be welcomed with open arms, as always, to share what he is doing as the president of that corporation to advance its goals and its mission, its supervision, and its management. The invitation is open, Dr. Showerman. By the way, I believe you may have lost your title as the most frequent guest on the podcast. I think Annie might be one up on you, and Hank very soon will be catching up quickly. So it's time you gain it back with another appearance on the show. I'm here. You know how to reach me, and I'm close by. And I mean it. Come share with the Quiller Nation what the SOF is going to be doing and plans to do. I wish the organization well. Onward and upward for our Lord of Oxford. And remember to always keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.